So, again on stage, and Lutz, Nitsche, German Federal Cultural Foundation, what I can say, without the German Federal Cultural Foundation, in German Kulturstiftung des Bundes, the World Cinema Fund wouldn't exist. This is the reality. And probably, maybe it's too much, but to be honest, this is the reality. Lutz, Nitsche is the World Cinema Fund fan number one.
Absolutely, the zero fan.
The zero fan. So, okay, because really I can remember very well the first day we got in touch with the German Federal Cultural Foundation. I met Lutz, Nitsche, and we started talking about this project. And suddenly I had a very good feeling. So, and after 16 years, or maybe more, because we met, I think, 2002 the first time.
That's true, yeah.
We are here talking about this initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And Lutz, I think we should talk a little bit about this definition, Decolonising Cinema. I think it's going to be a conversation. First, we said it would be an interview with Lutz, but now is a conversation. So thank you very much for your questions. But I would start with my questions. And Lutz, from the German Cultural Foundation point of view, could we say that the World Cinema Fund started with the intention to operate as an agent of decolonization?
Before I try to answer that question, let me start by thanking you, dear Vincenzo, thanking the World Cinema Fund, thanking the entire team of the World Cinema Fund, and also congratulating you. This is a corona pandemic, but that doesn't shock you. You're still doing the World Cinema Fund Day as if nothing had happened. And maybe we are kind of in new horizons of connectivity, and things that we've checked out now will also happen in the future. But let me get back to your question. As a matter of fact, I have to admit, when we started thinking about the World Cinema Fund, we didn't really have the idea of decolonizing cinema in our minds. It was actually mostly about the idea we have got all these great non-European actors and filmmakers, and we need to get more of that in the German frame in the German cinemas. So it was away from global Hollywood, away from German cinema, European cinema, and the idea was, and this is kind of rule number one at the World Cinema Fund, take the money, take the funding money, but don't spend it in Germany. Go with your German producers to the places of origin where you really want to make your own decisions about how to spend the money. And this is what we did, and this is how during the last 16 years we got all those great films with these great subjective perspectives, crude sometimes, very experimental, very poetic. And that's what we love. And talking about the title today, this is heavy stuff, Decolonizing Cinema. It's like a heavyweight, maybe Mission Impossible kind of slogan. And I wonder how we are going to dismantle it today with this conversation and during this World Cinema Fund Day. And I'm looking forward to that.
What I learned during these days and talking about with colleagues and scholars about the decolonization, I have learned definitely that decolonization is a process. Mm-hmm. So you can reach a decolonized cinema in 2 weeks, or maybe not in 2 years. I have another question, Lutz. The Kulturstiftung des Bundes is supporting international exchange all over the cultural scene. Mm-hmm. What is the significance of the decolonization in other fields?
Well, there have been, it's a huge variety of different initiatives that we've started within the film field of decolonizing culture. And of course, again, this term is way too a difficult, way too heavy. But there are, let me mention just 3. There is, for example, Turn, a program that fosters the exchange between German artists and artists from Africa, and that's all over the field. That may be fashion design, it may be urbanism, it may be theater, dance, what have you. There's another initiative by the name of Decoloniale, which is taking place in Berlin, and this is all about the traces of colonial history in Berlin, which may be hidden. And what's important about this initiative is that we were trying to bring in voices from from the civil society. So we don't have the normal experts. We've got experts from diasporic community who may be working in this field almost for decades, and it's only now that we're trying to bring them into the entire discourse of colonial history. And then maybe a third field of initiative would be a program that works with ethnographic collections, because they've got a very touchy situation. They have got all these objects, maybe human remains, artifacts, treasures from the colonial period. And the question is, what on earth are you going to do with that? I mean, it would be ridiculous to try to present it the way it was presented 100 years ago, but it's only now that these museums are trying to work very hard to find new concepts with reaching out, dealing with the collections, mobilizing objects, and also, of course, getting in touch with people, scientists or artists or what have you from the cultures of origin. And that may be one point, for example, where world cinema films and ethnographic collections may connect. You have colonial past and you've got a global presence, and how can these two things come together? Maybe World Cinema Fund offers answers to questions we are only beginning to ask in our entire discourse of decolonization. But let's leave that behind, the Kulturstiftung des Bundes. Let's get back to the World Cinema Fund. And I mean, you've been moderating all these World Cinema Fund days, and now is the chance to change the roles. And you've been asking so much, and now it's your part. It's time to tell, Vincenzo. And so many people know this book with this impressive archive of, I think it's 250 films.
We have supported 250 films. I don't know exactly the number of films included in the booklet, but we are more than 200, definitely.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So Vincenzo, let me ask you a couple of questions, and I want to start with maybe a simple one, but there are maybe two layers. Are there certain films that to you are most striking in the way that they deal with colonial history? And I mean that there may be two different layers. One is dealing directly with colonial past, or dealing with a system of coloniality that still dominates our presence?
I would say we have, starting from the beginning, when we started the World Cinema Fund, the idea was not, well, now we are going to support a kind of decolonized cinema. So the idea was to support hidden talents in many regions and countries who couldn't produce the film, or they couldn't really find an access to the global film market or to a global visibility. But obviously, I would say it was quite an automatic process, obviously also because for us it's a very interesting topic. Many films supported by the World Cinema Fund deal with post-colonial topic, with colonial history, or maybe, and I strongly believe in that, with the present of colonialism. So we cannot say that the world is decolonized, and I think probably particularly in some regions of the world, in Latin America, due also to a tragic political situation. We can also speak about a kind of internal recolonization. So, for example, Brazil, and talking also about the indigenous population. I would just some examples. So in 10 minutes or less, we are going to show you a panel of Decolonizing Cinema first. This is the title, Latin America. And we're going to introduce to you to some directors who have been supported by the World Cinema Fund during the last 2 years. And exactly these directors are really dealing in a strong and intensive way with colonialism and post-colonialism, the colonial heritage, and the present. So maybe I can tell their names. So Nelson Carlos de los Santos from Dominican Republic, Paz Encina from Paraguay. Paz Encina from Paraguay already shot some films focused somehow on colonialism, the consequence of colonialism at the Paraguayan present. David Preto from Brazil, definitely yes. Also, it's really, I think, the history and the anthropological historic structure of Brazil are the focus of his work. So definitely yes, we are definitely involved, and many films supported by the World Cinema Fund deal with the history with colonialism.
Let me be specific and ask you about one World Cinema Fund film, and it's again a Brazilian film. It's called The Fever, which has been out in the Berlinale in 2019, and it's the story about indigenous families that kind of get stuck between their traditional life in the village and modern urban life. And I want to quote the director, Maya Darin. She complained, and I now quote, "Cinema has the tendency to exoticize indigenous people," end of quote. Vincenzo, what do you think? How do filmmakers of the World Cinema Fund relate to the cultural dynamics of indigenous people, and how do they avoid the traps of exoticizing them and using maybe even racist stereotypes? Who's in control of the voice and of the images?
I think this is definitely a big challenge. I would also say that maybe trying to avoid cliches is one of the main goals of the World Cinema Fund. And if we speak about exoticism, this is also a central point of our work. And we really try our best. I think it's also a process. So if you read a script, how to deal with a hidden universe, it maybe could be related to some cliches. It's a big challenge. We try our best, but we are, I can tell you, pretty aware of this. So we can improve.
Okay. We've heard in the presentation of Viola Shafik that decolonizing cinema is nothing, not at all that we are talking about right now. It's got a long history. It's been part of neo-colonial, anti-colonial, not neo-colonial liberation movements. So there has been a strong political attitude combined to films. And I would like to ask you, is there still a sense of guerrilla attitude among World Cinema Fund filmmakers nowadays, and how can you sense it?
Well, the concept of guerrilla attitude, if you talk about decolonizing cinema, was pretty much linked to the third cinema movement of the 60s and of the 70s. Personally, I think guerrilla cinema is definitely a good definition, but I think also that with the World Cinema Fund, we try our best in order to support the international visibility of cinema. And it's about film industrial tools and facilities, which are very important in order to reach, if possible, a global visibility. And well, I think guerrilla cinema making can be useful, but maybe it's not the best tool to reach a global visibility. And yes, may I ask you another question?
No, I would like to continue with this point, because global visibility may be one thing, but what about local visibility?
Local visibility is definitely extremely important point. So we are not supporting films for European and American, Japanese, and South Korean audiences. I would just an example. So some years ago, we supported a film from Nepal, Kalopoti. Was shown in Venice the first time and won some awards. But this film was not only very, very well known, so in the film festival circuit, but it was also the #1 films in the Nepalese charts for many weeks. And I was very proud of it. So we are not working, I mean, if I mean global audience, I mean also local audiences.
Okay.
So this is my question.
Yeah.
During the last days, we had many conversations about decolonizing and decolonizing cinema. So what about the next steps? Decolonization is a process, and the next step should be probably let's decolonize ourselves. So as a white European man, Lutz, do you feel decolonized? Or you're starting?
I think it's a long way to go, and it's definitely more than an academic catchphrase. It's a working unit, I think, and it deals probably for maybe a lifelong. And there are so many layers to this question. I mean, looking at the film with Ayten Ahmin, you've got iPhones, for example, and they are being used as, again, instruments of liberation. But at the same time, iPhones are also embedded in a neo-colonial economic structure. And we're all using them all the time. So there are so many things to think about. And definitely, it's only a beginning right now. But I'm sure that World Cinema Films may help us to open our minds and open our hearts to so many things that are going on in formerly colonial countries.
Thank you very much, Lutz, and see you maybe next year for a normal World Cinema Fan Day, but also with internet and global diffusion.
We're looking forward to both. Thank you very much, Vincenzo.
Thank you very much, Lutz. And now, as I said during our conversation, we are going to start another video. This video is about Decolonizing Cinema 1 in Latin America. I have already introduced the panelists. And we are talking also about projects which are not films. Mm-hmm. So I think it's also very important for us to give certain visibility to the project and not only to the real films. So we are curating and supporting projects. So go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you later.